Damn.
Hey, welcome back to Crosstalk, the airwaves Bible study about cross-type topics. I'm Sam O'Banion. That's Nick Pannone. And when I say welcome back, I really do mean welcome back this time because we're back. It's happening.
Yeah, what, 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I think the last video on YouTube, it says it was 4 weeks ago posted. So
okay, so
close
yeah, just so people are aware of stuff, because I'm going to be doing that quite a bit as we go through this.
Yeah.
Whatever 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think you were under the weather a little bit.
Yep, I started off sick. Whoa.
Hey there. Now you're under the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were dealing with some family stuff with health-wise type things.
Oh, yeah.
Then I got COVID.
Yep.
And I was quarantined. I had attempted to kind of put some stuff together, and man, that whole fatigue thing is no joke. And then a couple of my family members at home were positive as well, and so we really ended up having to postpone a bunch of stuff, and we finally got to a spot where I'm in my office, you're in your office. I haven't even been in my office a full week yet since coming back. But we're in Galatians 5.
Yeah, for sure. We're officially there.
Yeah. We would have probably been getting awfully close to starting a new book.
Yeah.
if we didn't have that little COVID hiccup. But we're looking at Galatians 5, verses 1 through 15.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I just want to give just a quick kind of giving us the setting here, because if you haven't watched in a while, and you're joining with us, just so you know, as we're jumping into some stuff, Paul is starting sort of a fresh idea in chapter 5. Really, the fresh idea starts in 2. Verse 1 is going to be a weird transition. And we actually covered verse 1 a little bit, I believe, a month ago when we were finishing chapter 4. But the entire letter to the Galatian church has been Paul essentially defending his apostleship, but also doing that with a purpose of saying, hey, there's some people that have been in your camp that are teaching falsely, and they're telling you that the way to follow God is you need to continue to observe the Old Testament law, whereas I have taught you that because of Christ we are free from the bondage of the law, and the law and everything that the law entails. So even back in chapter 3, he calls it the curse of the law. So sin, the punishment of sin, what happens when we break the law, the fact that we can't help but break the law, like our human nature has demonstrated that, and that's sort of the purpose of the law, is to show that we have fallen short of being able to actually do this. Something needs to happen in order for us to be back in a right place with that, and that something that happened was the person in sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And so he has been making this argument consistently. We may get into a little bit more detailed argument that he's made, because there's going to be a spot as we go through our text today where it almost demands a catch-up of a review in his argument. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. But he specifically has introduced this back in chapter 2, but he's really going to hammer this down in this chapter. The idea of circumcision, that there's what we have called Judaizers who have come up and said the way to be in a saving salvation place with God, or a righteous place with God, is you have to observe the law, namely be circumcised. And Paul takes umbrage with this very severely in our text today, and we'll discuss a little bit what's going on with this. But up to this point, his argument has been very theological, a little bit legal, but very theological. And now it's chock full of exhortation, and here's what you need to do because of it, and here's what you don't need to do because of it.
We've officially hit the take this and run portion of the book,
which is very stylistic of Paul. Take Paul's name out of this, and we probably know that this is Paul.
For sure. So cool.
Yeah, man. So chapter 5, verses 1 through 15.
Yeah, and I think think I read last time, but since
Okay.
you just took the summary, I'll go ahead and read it again.
Go for it, man.
Not a big deal.
Have at
So,
it.
5:1 through 15. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Look, I, Paul, say to you that if you accept circumcision, Christ will be of no advantage to you. I testify again to every man who accepts circumcision that he is obligated to keep the whole law. You are severed from Christ, you who would be justified by the law. You have fallen away from grace. For through the Spirit, by faith, we ourselves eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything, but only faith working through love. You are running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion is not from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I have confidence in the Lord that you will take no other view, and the one who is troubling you will bear the penalty, whoever he is. But if I, brothers, still preach circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. I wish those who unsettle you would emasculate themselves. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another.
You know, I really wish Paul would be direct and tell us what he's thinking.
Yeah, I mean, like, be a better writer, Paul. It's just, it's really boring and unstylistic. So,
yeah, listen, if you think the Bible is boring, you just haven't read it.
yeah,
You really haven't. Should we dive in and work through some of this?
yeah, for sure. For freedom, Christ has set you us free. It's a great start.
There's three main sections, four really, but three main sections going on here. Verse 1 is sort of a transition verse, right? This is connected to what's at the end of 4 as much as it's connected to his argument here. But I've got 2 through 6, I've got 7 through 12, and I've got 13 through 15 is sort of the breakdowns of that. Okay,
Definitely.
Well, let's talk about verse 1. This is sort of a kind of a standalone type thing. So, for freedom, Christ set us free. I would point out real quick the first person plural of this, right? Because there's going to be this inclusio that he does with the tense of the verbs here. This sort of sandwich. So he's first person plural here, and then he's going to come back to first person plural after he makes some very drastic statements. Very yeah. It's good stuff. So what you got on this? A lot of freedom going on here.
Yeah, for freedom, Christ has set us free. Just going from a philosophical standpoint, this is an interesting argument. Like, why did Christ set us free? For the sake of freedom. Like, for freedom's sake, for our own liberty's sake, he has set us free. Which can, if you want to chase philosophical rabbit holes, even theological ones, it's interesting. It's like, it's just such an interesting reason to set somebody, like, why would you set a slave free just for freedom's sake? That kind of makes sense, but I don't know. It's not a philosophical conundrum, but it's a very something to chase down still. Like, for freedom's sake, you're free.
Well, let's go down one of those holes just a little bit, okay? Because I think you've got some information that's going to be very pertinent and actually it's going to be really interesting and probably feeds some of the rest of the argument that we're looking at, if I'm not mistaken. But I want to talk about the words here, because the Greek is want to untangle some things with this, okay? So we've got two words. We have a word that's a noun for freedom, and we have a word that's a verb for freedom.
Yeah.
All right. So let me talk about the noun. Eleutheria, or something like that. Eleutheria. Okay. That's a noun. There you go. It's the state of being free, right?
Yeah.
Eleutheria. And then elerao, okay, which is derived from the noun eleutheros, right? Which is to cause someone to be free.
Yeah.
Right. Now, here's where we jump down the hole a little bit. We actually derive our English word elude from, or elude or eluding from the root of these really three Greek words going on here.
I assume elude, E-L-U-D-E.
Yes, elude.
Not elude.
Not allude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be strange.
Yeah.
That'd be a strange connection in English. Sorry.
It's elude. Okay.
Yeah.
But this is quite fascinating when you think about this. All right. So elude is to escape, right? Yeah. Or to dodge, or to be elusive, right? But this verse gives purpose to the illusion, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not just saying what are you escaping from, but what are you escaping to? Yeah. I think this is maybe the biggest teaching point in this entire text, and he's gonna come in a big roundabout way, come back to this idea. Hey, for freedom you have been set free, right? So you have escaped from this entire argument, the bondage of the law, the curse of the law. Yeah. What do we do with that freedom? Well, you be free. Okay, so in my freedom, can I still choose, name it, right? Well, freedom isn't just about choice, and this is the relative and relevant preaching point, I think. Now, it's not just choice. It's that we get to be now bonded to something greater than the slavery that Paul has been teaching and preaching about. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I hope that makes sense. There's a truckload of purpose in his word usage here.
And yeah, and part of that is I read it was somebody kind of parsing out some philosophical things around this idea of freedom, and there was one, I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head, and I didn't write it down. Okay. There's a philosopher that basically said that this idea of freedom isn't necessarily the freedom to do whatever you want. It's the license of clearly knowing what not to do, basically, of you're free to do whatever, and also to know what is already right, or something like that. And it was just a fascinating entry into what freedom is to them.
Alludes to the responsibility of freedom, right?
Yeah.
Okay, is that not then the teaching point then for us living in middle America? Right? But we love the concept of freedom. And I've heard this verse used way out of context so many times.
The Bible out of context? Are you sure?
I'm not just talking about, I'm talking this specific verse. And it's, it is, we love freedom. I love freedom. You love freedom. Great. I want us to know what we're talking about when we say freedom. But my freedom's getting taken away. Well, what does that mean? Let's talk about this. Let's dialogue about this. Yeah. And it's not. We got to get it away from just the concept of choice when we're talking about biblical freedom. Okay. Yeah. Choice is a big deal. Choice is important. I'm for choice. Okay. I'm for being able to choose personally, rather than someone else make the choice for me. Okay. If those are my only two choices I get to choose from, but it's not biblically. It's just not. It's who is my allegiance going to be with? Yeah. And there's an inherited responsibility that comes with that freedom. Yeah. I think that's the foundation of Paul's painting, I think.
With great freedom comes great responsibility, as Uncle
Draw
Ben
a picture
said.
of that. I think people will buy it.
Yeah. I'm going to make a whole movie around that idea. You should. That's Spider-Man, just for everybody who's not there yet. If you're not a Spider-Man fan, that's straight from Spider-Man.
There you go.
Anyway, yeah.
Are we ready to go to the next verse?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, unless you had something, man, go for it.
No, I was just going to say my fun fact that isn't pertinent to the verse at all is the word for freedom, the eleutheria, is in Greek and Roman thought is actually the personification of liberty and freedom. And we actually have that in America as well in the Statue of Liberty, which was modeled off Libertas, the Roman goddess of freedom. So just fun fact.
Yeah, yes. So what Sam is saying, the personification there, the Statue of Liberty was supposed to be what liberty looks like as a person, right?
Which, and if you look at there's old Roman coins that have the goddess Libertas, which is the goddess of freedom, on it, and it bears a striking resemblance to our Statue of Liberty.
Yeah,
which is just interesting.
And it's a very common thing too, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do this with the Greek word Sophia, which means wisdom.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. Yeah. This is why you're able to go look up your name and see what it means in whatever language it used to be. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, by the way. I do think that's important. I think that feeds into what it is we're looking at here. Okay, verse 2. All right.
Look.
This
my favorite start to a verse ever.
Yeah, look, I, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. These first three words here clue us in to not the exaggeration that Paul's going to make, but the emphasis that Paul's making here. Okay. Mm-hmm. Lots of schools of thought going into what's going on here. There are some who believe that all he's doing is emphasizing right here. There are some who believe, and I think this might be the main argument, the most common one that's going on here, that Paul oftentimes had a scribe that would pen what he was saying. And some say, with the verbiage and the words being used here, look, I, Paul, say to you, that Paul took the pen back into his own hand and started, listen, no one else is writing this down for me. I'm going to address you with this. Yeah. This is how important what this is that I'm about to tell you.
And I mean, we have other examples of that.
2 Timothy.
Look with what big letters I'm writing to you with. Like he's saying, I am writing this. Like I am really trying to emphasize. This is modern day italics, bold, underline. Like we got it all.
Correct. Yeah. It is Pauline emoji right here.
Yeah.
So, okay. So look, I, Paul, say to you that if you accept circumcision, Christ will be of no advantage to you. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is putting the ball on the tee right here. In the next several verses, he's about to just smash it down the fairway.
Yeah. He's been not so subtle so far. And this is just here. Let me be as direct as possible.
Exactly. And there's a shift in gears here. Okay. Again, notice the tense of the verbs. It's not we and us like it was in verse 1. It's now you and you all. All right.
I say to you. Yeah.
I say to you. So to kind of understand what's going on, Paul's theological foundation for his primary argument has been happening since chapter 2, about verse 16, all the way through the previous verse. Right. So when he says, look, this is kind of saying, based on everything I have just poured out to you, if you still accept or participate with circumcision, I got nothing else for you.
Yeah.
Christ is of no value to you. What is he saving you from?
Yeah. And the circumcision versus Christ argument, there's no porque dos. Why not both? Like you can't, it's one or the other. If you accept circumcision, then there's no advantage all to having Christ in your life.
You can agree or disagree with Paul, right?
Yeah.
There's zero in between.
Yeah. Like zero shades of gray.
Yeah. He doesn't give you any space to be in both camps at the same time here. All right.
For sure.
One place I read, I love this description here. Okay. And I want to talk about it for just a second. This is this kind of argument on top of argument, this exhortation that Paul's giving us. He's giving us, they said, an imperative that grows out of the indicative. Okay, I love that. This is an imperative that grows out of the indicative. Here's what I think they're talking about, right? So this is the Nicanese translation of what that means. If you desire the law, okay, that means you need to desire the whole law. Right?
Mhm.
There is no such thing as being law abiding and breaking stuff you don't care about, breaking the law, parts of the law you don't care about. Right? So if you desire circumcision, that means you've taken on everything else with the law. Right? So it leads you to a place where you go, okay, I need to be circumcised. But if your desire is for circumcision, well, then you've negated or forfeited the profit that comes, the benefit that comes with accepting Christ, right? Which is Christ is accepted through faith of his grace, of his mercy.
Yeah.
It is a lack of recognition that you broke the law. Now this is important because this is holistic, okay? This is the entire thing. I know we're going to talk specifically about circumcision throughout this entire argument, but even in the next verse, it's the whole law, right? That you've taken on the whole law. So if I take on circumcision, that means I got to take on everything else that comes with it. And some of what comes with it is the sacrificial laws, right?
Yeah.
And if we continue to go back to the sacrificial law, then we have totally said Christ is not once for all.
Yeah, we've made his sacrifice null and void because we need to continue to sacrifice.
Yeah, the cross is meaningless, right? The cross, all we did is, at best, put an innocent dude on a criminal's post.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it means that the imperative grows out of the indicative. Okay, you've indicated what it is your heart's desire is. Now it's imperative that you live that out. So if your desire is for the law, Christ is of no value. If your desire is for righteousness and grace, in he's going to say the word truth, then we need to talk about something else.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. This isn't the only time he makes the argument either. I got a reference for anybody who wants to go look it up, but Romans chapter 3, 9 through 20. Essentially what he's saying is and this fits into to verse 3 here as well, but to adhere to any of the law, then one is subjected to the whole law. James also says if you break one law, you've broken all of the law. Yeah. So there is no saving benefit of adhering to the law. Right? The law's purpose, essentially, and you see this in Romans 3, you've seen this already in Galatians, the law's purpose is to show us that we're in need of grace.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of the law. And back in chapter 3, Paul calls it the curse. Right?
Yeah.
All right. That's 2. All right, 3. This is where we're taking off. We're not at full speed yet, but we're running hard right here.
Yeah.
Okay. I testify again to every man who accepts circumcision that he is obligated then to keep the whole law. I've got some stuff on this. I've got some things on this. To submit to circumcision, paratemno, okay, and we've discussed that word in previous videos, is to avail oneself to the whole law, and in Greek, holos nomos, or holon ton nomon, in the case that it is in this sentence. So if, again, that goes back to what we were just talking about in verse 2, to say, all right, circumcision is it. You can't just pick and choose what part of God's law that is most benefit to you. Also, let's think about this for a second. If you're going to pick and choose which part of God's law you're going to follow, why are you picking on the paratemno?
Why are you dying on this hill?
There's some other ones, man. Go wash hands. Let's do that. There's some good ones over there. Let's avoid some of the things that they're talking about, that the law does talk about. All right. Scholars tend to kind of struggle with the I testify again portion of this. Like, what is it that he's actually arguing? What's the argument about? Couple options here that I've run into. One of them is called Gnostic libertinism. All right, and we're going to actually talk about libertinism a little bit later. But essentially, that there is this part of Gnosticism, again, the special knowledge, because I have this special knowledge I'm saving. I'm in a saving relationship. I have this this mystical thing that has been revealed to me. And there's a way that gets abused really fast, really quickly. And so that's where the freedom, the libertinism comes from. So if I perform the rite to circumcision, that means I'm freed from all other moral obligations. And Paul then is pointing out the fatal flaw in that type of thinking. That sounds really good to me, and I would be on board with that. We just don't know. Like if you say this is what he's referring to, we just don't know. We don't have any evidence of that.
Yeah.
It's possible. We just don't know. Another thing that some point to is just the Galatians' naivete. They just didn't get it. They just don't know. But hey, someone came up and said, this is what we need to do. Okay, let's do it. And so basically the Galatians simply did not know that this was the case. And so Paul is letting them know.
Yeah.
This is a very unconvincing argument, in my opinion, for a lot of reasons, but mainly Paul is very severe in his argument.
He's very clearly saying, you know what's right and wrong here. Like,
yeah,
and for them to claim ignorance, it doesn't make sense with Paul's level of manifestation of this argument. Like,
correct. Also, guys, I was there and I taught you this.
Yeah.
You know, because I gave you the knowledge.
I was the one.
Yeah, and that goes back into chapter 1 when he's defending his apostleship. Like, you knew who I was with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the other case that's made here is that Paul's connecting this argument to chapter 3, verse 10. Again, this is where the connection to those that are under the law are also under a curse. Right? So you go back and said the curse of the law is basically what it is. In all kinds of things. Go back and listen to our talk on that, because we cover that pretty thoroughly. But the curse going on here is, hey, the curse of the law is that you can't keep it, a failure to keep it, which means we can't be righteous on our own. Which is in itself an indictment for your entire being. Right, and that's what he's saying here. Hey, if you go back to circumcision, right? I'm telling you again. If you go back to this, if you go back to practicing this, then you're obligated to do the rest of the law. And guess what? You didn't do it. You failed. You failed at this. Also, our current success doesn't eliminate our previous failures, right? What then eliminates our previous failures? Grace. And that's it. Yeah. That's it. That's like saying, I'm going to be very, very exaggerated here. I beat my wife, but guys, I brought home a paycheck, right? I put food on the table. Right? Well, good. That success doesn't eliminate the abuse that you caused, right? That if you're going to go back to this, you're subjugating yourself to all of it. Right? Yeah. And the previous verse says, well, you've null and void the profit and the benefit you have in Christ Jesus then. Yeah. And also the next verse gets even more stricter with that. Yeah, you can't be a part-time slave. Like, you have to be either slave or free. Like, there's no half and half of this. Right. Yeah. Which is the lesson that is in the wilderness after the parting of the Red Sea. Yeah. Okay. No, way to tie in the story there. That's, the very, very pastorally of me right here. Good deal. Sure. Okay, I'm verses 4 and 5. I think are so fantastic. They're so the fact that we have these two sentences together is so thrilling to me. All right, and I'm going to tell you why here in just a second. Yeah. Okay. And I get you have to be a little bit sick in the head to kind of get thrilled by this. All right. But I'm thrilled by this. Let's talk about verse 4 first. All right. Continuing our language, right? Our verbiage here, you. Not me. Yeah. You specifically. Yeah. And if we're in Oklahoma, the translation is y'all. All right. Okay. I think if you're anywhere south of like the Mason-Dixon line, it might be y'all. Correct. This is third person plural is what it is. Yeah. You are listen to this. You are severed from Christ, you who would be justified by the law. You have fallen away from grace. I don't see this verse as like on very many fireplace mantles.
Not hanging above the kitchen table.
This isn't one people memorize and say, this is my favorite verse. Okay, man, listen to this. You are severed from Christ, you who would be justified by the law. You have fallen away from grace. There ought to be all kinds of red lights and warnings and just going, holy smokes. This is harsh.
Mm-hmm.
This is harsh. Verbs. Severed. Katerethete, and have fallen. Exepesita. Okay?
Yeah.
Really difficult words to say, but they're written in the aorist tense.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I want to talk about this for a second. Sometimes we get into this conversation about the cases of the nouns. This happens to be the tense of the verb. Okay.
Yeah.
In language arts, the cases of the nouns and the tense of the verbs, they have these set of rules that you have to follow when you're interpreting them. And then there's this giant list of exceptions to everything. When you
it's real fun.
It's awesome. This is why, they call it language arts, not language science, right?
Yeah.
Okay. With the aorist, it really, to my knowledge, I would love to have a conversation with someone who knows Greek better than I do, but from what I can tell, there's not a whole lot of exception. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you read these verbs and you go, did Paul just tell them that they are severed from Christ and that they have already fallen away? The problem is the rest of the context of the passage in the letter doesn't indicate that at all. This is why verse 5 is so important, so critical, that it's smashed together with the rest of it. All right. So I read someone say that this is an aorist nomic sense.
Okay.
Awesome.
I was gonna say, I've never heard of nomic.
I haven't either. I spent way too much time looking this up. Okay. In other words, Paul was borrowing from an aphorism. And if you don't know what an aphorism is, actually, I went to Webster's Dictionary to look that up. It's a small statement or sentence of truth or principle. Mm-hmm. Okay. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's aphorism, essentially. Very simple one, but it's aphorism type thing. In other words, the sense of this is the nomic sense that Paul is referring to here is, if you're going to go back to and revert back to this teaching, here is going to be the result. Mm-hmm. His exhortation is resist the teaching. Otherwise, you are in danger of what the theological term is, apostasy. Mm-hmm. Right? In our Western church today, we have this massive debate of, can you lose your salvation? Right? I don't know how you read verse 4 and not see that that's a possibility. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I got in a debate with a good friend of mine about this, who once saved, always saved kind of thing. Right. And he would tell me, if he was here right now, he's a great guy, love this guy to death. Okay. He would say, Nick, are you saying that you can jump in salvation and jump out and jump in and jump out and jump in and jump out? That's not what I'm arguing at all. I think that's a terrible caricature of the other side of once saved, always saved. That no intelligent person I know accepts that. Okay, this is not a trampoline. You can't just bounce in and out and in and out and out. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is, we are saved, but it is possible for us to walk out of that. Yeah. And I'm not saying that Paul said it. I'm just agreeing with Paul. Like, if we say, okay, all we got to do is get wet in the baptistry, and then I can go back to my previous sinful way. Mm-hmm. We've got problems. That I think is the biblical definition of apostasy.
This is off subject a little bit. It's a question based off that. Do you think the argument is that if somebody gets baptized, but then goes back to a life of sin, do you think the argument becomes, well, they weren't really saved? Like their salvation wasn't legitimate. They just got, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you're asking a fair question. We don't have a ton of time to dive into that fully. What I would say, this is my response to this. I got a two-part response. One, I think it's a case-by-case situation. Okay, I think so. The answer to that question is that it's possible. But my second part to that is I read in the beginning of Hebrews chapter 6. And Hebrews chapter 6 talks about the person who has tasted salvation and essentially benefited from salvation. Okay. I don't know how that's possible without actually being saved, right? Where you've made, it's like repenting from repenting. That's what apostasy is. And so while that might be the case, and I totally agree, I don't, in the Calvinistic teaching, that's called irresistible grace, okay? And I don't think in that way that grace has become irresistible. I do think it's possible for someone to have known and claimed Christ as their Lord and Savior, and then at least has walked away from him being Lord. And I think that that's a problem and very scary for me as a pastor to have that type of false security. And I think you can fall away from it.
I definitely don't subscribe to once saved, always saved. That was just more of a devil's advocate question.
I know, and I know you're hard on that too. So that's not, there's no accusation to you on that.
Anyway, I had this conversation really recently with one of my sisters, and the follow-up question was, well, then how do you know you're saved? And it was like,
okay, so I think this is going to come up. I think this is going to come up in the rest of our text. Let's keep going with this because I want to hit verse 5 because verse 5 helps support the argument that Paul's making and helps support a couple of things I just said. All right.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the verbs again. All right. For through the Spirit by faith, here it is, we ourselves eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. Right. Yeah. We have moved from you and y'all to we ourselves. You see how that is? Yep. So I don't think, I made the claim that Paul is saying that he resists this teaching, otherwise you're in danger of apostasy. This could be the result. And this is why, because he includes us as the encompassing language, the we language he has right here, demonstrates to me that he doesn't believe that the Galatians have gone that far yet. Okay, that it's still possible for them to adhere to truth, and that we ourselves wait for the hope of righteousness. All kinds of fun things going on with this. So first person plural, we hammered that. That's our inclusio, right? So all the way back to verse 1. There's the sandwich that we have right there, the first person plural sandwich we got right there. All right. Some verbs again, wait for. This is such a crazy word. I kept running into these multi-syllable words here.
Are you talking about waiting?
Yeah. Wait for.
Decometha.
There you go. Yeah. You could emphasize just about any syllable there.
6 syllables. Yeah.
Exactly. But it every time that word gets used or a version of that word gets used in Scripture, in all the Bible, it always has eschatological realities attached to it, right? Yeah. So we wait for, and what they're talking about is the things that are going to happen at the end. And that's what eschatological means. End times, in study of end times, study of end time things. Okay. Then hope, elpida, right? Or elpida. I'm going to avoid the soapbox because I don't want us to be stuck on this too much. Just know that the word hope is not a fanciful wish.
Yes.
Don't Disneyfy hope. This is not.
You can go back to there's an Ephesians one that we talk about hope. a lot. And how
We do.
Yeah.
But it's so critical. Hope is not wishing upon a star.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But hope is it's the reality of that end thing. This the thing you can cling to, the buoy that is in the ocean that we can find our salvation in.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, believers. Here's the gist of it. Believers do not base their hope in obedience, but in faith in God through Christ. Therefore, obedience is a result or a byproduct of that faith. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting obedience isn't important. I'm saying obedience is a result of the faith that we have in God, not the way to God.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. So obedience demonstrates our faith.
Mm-hmm.
So don't go back to circumcision. Don't go back to your old way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
obedience to circumcision doesn't get you anything.
It just demonstrates that you can earn it again. See what I did? See what I did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I love that verse 4 and verse 5 are together. There's nothing that transitions those two away from each other, and I get thrilled by that. There's no transition from apostasy teaching and warning to we have this hope that we eagerly wait for. And we do this, and he brings up righteousness again, and righteousness just floods the rest of the teaching or the rest of the way. Yeah, just oversees all that. Good stuff. You ready for verse 6?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's keep plowing through here. Verse 6. For in Christ, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything, but only faith working through love. I love. It's like Paul said. I want to be very careful that I'm not bragging about the uncircumcision either. It's not even the thing, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're far more concerned about it than God ever will be.
Yeah. This is like, why are we even having this debate? Like, this is neither side of this matters. Like, what matters is the faith you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the conclusion and reason for what we just talked about in verse 5. Righteousness then is a gift of faith, not of works. It's a gift of faith, not of works. Circumcision and uncircumcision are not profitable places of bragging or boasting, which is such a strange. My third grader would say, Dad, that's a weird flex. I'm circumcised, I'm not uncircumcised. Yeah, that's a weird flex. She would actually say that's sus.
Nice.
Yeah.
Man, your kids are all down with the lingo.
Especially my third grader.
That's funny.
Fantastic with this. I picked this up. It's gonna show back up again. Faith is the root. Love is a fruit. Right? So this thing that we're growing and being a part of, it's rooted in faith of God through Christ Jesus. And one of the fruits that comes from that is love. That's gonna show back up in some stuff that we read about. A weird kind of thing that went through this. I read one person try to make a what they call a theology in action here, kind of a homiletical point, saying that this is counter to our postmodern world. I actually thought that was a weird flex.
Okay.
Because it was actually written in like 2017.
We're well into postmodernism. Like by 2017, you're like,
if you're
years
still
separated from postmodernism.
If you're still fighting postmodern thought, God bless you, and say hello to my high school self.
Here's how. When I was in college, from 2010 to 2014, I had to take a class about postmodernism, and our professor opened the class with, by the time you know what era you're in and how to combat it, you're already through it.
What was your professor's name?
Oh, I think this was with Weatherly.
Okay, because I had the exact same conversation with Overdorf, who made us read a book about preaching to the postmodern culture.
I think I had him for Hom, and I might have that book somewhere up here. It might be at home too, because he talked about that, and he talked about how like you don't know what era you're in until you're out of it. And then you go, oh, that's what this was. And that's exactly what postmodernism is. Like once you're out of it, it's like, oh, well, this is.
He told me the reason why we're reading this is because he goes, because you haven't written the postmodern book yet. That's so crazy. Listen, postmodernism, you can go look it up. The main thrust of it is this relativism. And I do think that there's remnants of it, but I think our culture now is actually living in the results of postmodern thinking. I just don't think we actually live in a culture. You can't have cancel culture and postmodern culture at the same time.
If you do a little bit of research into what postmodernism is,
Correct.
You can track logically how we got from postmodern thought to
whatever
things that are happening today.
Correct.
It's pretty same thing with modernism and postmodernism. I mean, modernism was all about the singularity of man and like how you should be self-possessed and work hard, and that led naturally into what postmodern is because modernists taught postmodernists. So
correct. Correct.
I have a better flex for you from verses 5 and 6 though.
Do it.
Because I read an article that argued the phrase by faith and faith working through love were, what did he say? They're allusions to the faith of Christ or the faithfulness of Christ argument, and that Paul was just using a shorthand phrase here. So when he says by faith, he was actually meaning by the faithfulness of Christ, but he was using shorthand Greek for this section. And I was reading this and I was like, this is like, you're not only like jumping ahead on an argument, you're just making things up at this point.
What do you base that on? Like, what?
You can't just add words, man. Like,
there's no evidence of any of that.
Classic postmodern thought. That was 2005.
Anyway. that there is why it was dying.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, let's move through these next few. Right here. So this next section,
we can jump through some of this pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think we need to. Okay, so you were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? All right, Paul's getting fairly personal here. I will say this though. There's a preaching point in this. This is a fundamental pastoral question.
Yeah,
this is a fundamental pastoral question. Go back to chapter 3, 1 through 5. Paul pretty clearly demonstrates that he believes that the Galatians received the faith well, that they started well. But here, I think we can imply then that faith is the root, but obedience is a fruit. Okay, so we've gone from love as a fruit to obedience as part of this fruit. You started well. Who hindered you from this? And we're getting to singular pronouns here. Okay, so we've started out with, okay, there's Judaizers. Who's the leader of the pack? Okay, that gets us to verse 8 then. This persuasion is not from him who calls you. All right. So the argument for salvation by means of anything but Christ is not from God. The only real litmus test is that. All right. So you I think you were talking about your conversation that you were having. How do you know then? How do you know? I think this is it. I think this is that's how we know, is that adherence to Christ. 1 John, and we have several passages that are very similar to this, but 1 John chapter 4 verses 1 through 2. I just want to read this. Right? I actually wrote this out because I think this is so important in what Paul's talking about here. Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. And this is the way. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses Christ Jesus has come in the flesh is from God. And when John and other writers say this, talking about confessing, it's not just saying, confession isn't just saying it out loud. Confession is like erupting from within, right? This is so, it's so bottled up in my heart that it can't help but, like lava from a volcano, shoot out from my mouth.
Christianese of it, the overflow of your heart, kind of.
It is. It absolutely is. Only the positive version of it, like the coming out the other way. All right. So that to me is the test thing. Well, how do you know? Because of the overflow of your heart. That's how you know. Yeah. What's coming out?
Yeah.
All right. So obedience then is the fruit of that. Verse 9, a little leaven leavens the whole lump.
Yeah.
There you go. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. In case you don't know what that means, leaven is is the yeast essentially that causes the bread or whatever grain, the thing that you're making to rise.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like a flat cracker.
Yeah, you're using yeast to rise a dough.
Yeah, and you don't
Or watch the Great British Baking Championship, for instance.
It is, and especially during this time, once you put that in there and it bakes together, you can't go into a baked loaf of bread and remove the leaven.
Yeah.
You just need a little bit. And I think this is the big apostasy warning right here. If you accept this, even in good faith of Christ Jesus, that infiltrates everything. It's false teaching is very infectious disease-like, right? It spreads. It encompasses. And so pretty soon there's no difference between the bread and the leaven.
Yeah.
Okay. Good deal. We're plowing through this. Verse 10, I have confidence in the Lord that you will take no other view, and the one who is troubling you will bear the penalty, whoever he is. Again, singular, right?
Yeah.
Let's boil this down. There's a preaching point here I want to highlight, though. Paul is confident that his warning will set them straight. Right? He's confident that I have convinced you if you read this open-mindedly. Yeah. Right? There's nothing else you can conclude. But God's judgment will be for the one that's agitating, or for the Judaizer, the one that's leading this cause. I started thinking about this. Right? This is Nickism here. Do we take God's judgment seriously?
No.
I wonder, like, does God's judgment persuade us like it needs to persuade us?
No. But I think that's also a sign of postmodernism.
Maybe.
And postmodernism and a little bit of modernism. We don't preach sinners in the hands of an angry God anymore. That's not going to persuade a postmodern world. I think the only time that the idea of God's judgment and fearing the Lord come into play is after you believe, and then you start reading and start devoting yourself actually to these things. That's when you start going, oh, wait a minute.
Or if I'm pointing the air out in your life.
Yeah.
It's kind of a thought or philosophy, if you will, that I hide my own personal thought behind. So God will judge you, and I say that as a way to cover up the fact that I'm judging you.
Yeah.
All right. And boy, do we get concerned with other people's sins. We're entertained by it, and we can't get enough of it.
That's what reality TV is.
Yeah. My kind of mind went to this God's judgment and the in judgment. Does it personally convict me anymore? Right? We sort of say it as a throwaway. And we also like other things better. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yeah.
Right. God,
it's way easier to talk about love than it is damnation.
But without damnation, can we seriously talk about love?
I mean,
fully? Yeah, I don't think so.
No, of course not.
What a fascinating conversation this would be today.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's a balance to everything. You can't. Man, I don't know if I want to make this the place where I air out my grievance against the universal church's superficiality when it comes to conversations about self-awareness and conversations about God and godliness, because I could be here a while. But I think there's a real issue with face value Christianity, where like I think we often talk about things like we need to be more upfront with people and say, and go up to somebody and say, hey, how's your walk going? When the reality is we're putting that impetus on other people when we rarely want to put it even on ourselves.
Yeah.
And so
how's
there's this,
my walk going?
yeah, exactly. So there's this superficiality where we want the good and not the bad in everything.
Planks
And so
in sawdust. Planks in sawdust. Like
exactly.
there's a speck in your eye, but I got a log.
Yeah.
And not only, I don't think we ignore the log. I think we justify the log or the plank.
Yeah. I think you and I should write a book together called Crystal Clear Church. And it's just about here's how the church can thrive in a postmodern world.
And I'd be listen,
vulnerability.
I think there's some validity to that, actually. I think someone needs to, and why not? And here's the catch to this, though, okay? The catch to this, and this brings me back to verse 10 and should launch us into 11 here. The catch to it is you and I have to deal with our own stuff then.
Yeah.
Like I can't sit down and write about God's judgment in your life without dealing with it first.
Yeah.
And I bet that would be a fascinating journey through that. But I'll be honest, I'm terrified to death to think about it.
I'm very pro transparency. So I'll say this out loud. Like I'm on anti-anxiety / depression meds. And so as someone who's gone through a journey in that, it isn't great when you kind of, because I've done this. I don't know if I'm a great person to have this conversation with, because I have had to, in my own walk, look at myself in the eye and go, you might be going to hell, my dude. Like you need to get your stuff together. Like,
okay. So, but that's the thing. And so do we believe that that's a realistic possibility?
Yeah.
And that ought to shape us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the thing with this too. I think that's also how we understand grace better.
Yeah, 100%. That shapes my view more of God's mercy, of where, because that's a question I ask myself every day and kind of pray out. Where does your justice end and your mercy begin? Yeah. At what point will you stop being just and you'll start being merciful?
Okay. But that's kind of the catch to that, right? So if that's the case, then I'm concerned for God's judgment for you. Mm-hmm. So much so I want you to know his grace. Yeah. That he's written in writing for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that justifies our annoying people with our faith. Yeah. That I'm going to bother you with my faith, not because I want to bring judgment on you. I want to annoy you with my faith because I think judgment is being brought on you. And I want you to know the God that I know, the Father that I know. The catch to all of that is I got to know him. Yeah. I can't just say things about him or hear what other people say about him or hold signs about him. I got to know him.
So I just taught this in Christian Companions for this weekend. We talk about Apollos and how he's teaching in Ephesus, and then Aquila and Priscilla pull him aside to teach him more because he kind of it seems like he knows the logistics of the argument for Christ, but not the grace and Holy Spirit and the love portion of it. He knows argumentatively how to make everything connect, but he doesn't understand like the gospel, like what the gospel can do for your own life. And so I talk about that, of the idea of like, yeah, it's great to know the information, but if you don't know the person, then what good is it? Like you have to know the person of Christ, and if more so than the information of it.
And we need to take that seriously, is I think my point. That do we heed this strong enough? That's the question I have on there.
And the answer is no.
Probably. That's probably accurate.
No, generally.
You're talking about in mass.
Yes.
Yeah, collectively, probably not. I'm convinced that we have individuals that step up to the plate every single day.
It'd be
I just
foolish
wanna-
not to think we have individuals who do.
I just want to find myself as one of them. And
Yeah.
listen, that judgment exists. Judgment day exists. And if we don't believe that's true, it's time to step out. And so, okay, so that's verse 10. We've got just a few more verses to do this with. Verse 11, but if I, brothers, still preach circumcision, why am I being persecuted? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. All right, talk about this for a second. Apparently, the agitator, or the agitators, the false teachers, were saying Paul would want you to be circumcised, or at least that's kind of the
the implication.
Listen, Paul was great, but man, he's a Jew also. Like, have you met Timothy yet? He had Timothy get circumcised, right?
Yeah.
Paul's saying, look, if that's the case, why aren't they being persecuted? Why are they the ones holding the club and I'm the ones that are feeling the club?
Why are Judaizers so mad at me then? Like, I don't understand. Yeah.
Exactly. I don't get it. Like, come on. Let's think about this a little bit. All right. Then if you understand that that's probably the case of what's going on. By the way, he brings up the cross. Okay. Staros or staros. The cross rejects all human attempts to be right with God.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the cross. The only way to be right with God is through the cross. And that is through Christ's sacrifice for us and the grace that's demonstrated, the mercy that's demonstrated right there. Okay. And I don't want that just to be a throwaway thing. That's what he's saying right here. If that's the teaching, man, then we reject what the cross is all about. If we understand this with Paul, and this is the plight that he's in the thing that's going on with him, and now we can see this as a true opponent that's coming with him, I think then we can understand why he's so severe in the next verse. Right? Okay, and there's some weird stuff going on here. I wish those
we're going to turn it to junior hires.
Listen, I wish those who unsettle you would emasculate themselves. If you are listening to this and not actually reading your Bible, please read that verse so you know that Sam and I are not making this up. Right?
Yeah.
I did a weird journey with this, and gosh, I debated how far we get into this, but I think we need to get into this just for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. The word emasculate, other translations will say mutilate.
Yeah.
Others get very, they back away from it very.
Yeah. There's one that's like cut themselves off.
Yeah, that's not what it means.
Nope.
Okay.
Well, it means to cut off, but in a different way.
In specific way.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, we're adults here, okay? The word is apokopto.
Yep.
Okay. It means to cut off the penis.
Yep.
Right. It is used.
Literally emasculate.
It means, this is why we can say emasculate, mutilate. The nature of what Paul's saying is, hey, if you're going to circumcise, keep going. Right. I wish you'd just keep going.
That's a great way to say it.
There's the history of this word was so bizarre. I had to look this up, okay? Because it does mean to cut off. In certain contexts, we can use it to refer to other things. When the disciple cut off the Roman soldier's ear, this word is used, but they're very specific as to what he cut off. If they weren't specific about it, we would sit there and go, oh, buddy.
Peter, why did you do?
But come on. Yeah. Come on. Okay. Here it means to cut off the penis. I wish they would just go all the rest of the way. In history, in antiquity, most of the time the word is used as either a farming word that you're emasculating or mutilating a bull, whatever male cattle you might have, okay? Or it's in reference to someone who becomes a eunuch.
Yeah.
Okay. However, this word is used and sometimes in a derogatory way in antiquity. We know it's used by Homer. We know it's used by Herodotus. We know it's used by Diodorus Siculus. And we know for sure it's used by Josephus multiple times. He was he uses that quite a bit. Sometimes he's describing and recording things, and sometimes you sit there and go, Josephus, come on, buddy.
He's editorializing a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Paul's severe in this. Yeah. Guys, if you don't think I'm serious about this, I wish whoever it is that says we need to do this, just would keep going. Just finish the job. Finish the job. Yeah. It's a weird thing. Now, here's the other thing too. To cut off or throw out or get rid of, there are a litany of other Greek words that Paul could have used. Okay. I actually have, I looked this up. I told you I did it got dark in some places. I looked up apokopto to see, okay, is there any way we could have translated this any other way? The answer to that is no, by the way. I spent way too much time trying to figure that out. Our translators in the ESV and some of the other guys that did this, emasculate is sound.
To give you a pause break for a second, just fun fact, emasculate used to only mean castration. Like that was the only word that was just another word for castrate. I mean, now it means to like deprive you of your manhood, or like
Correct.
To I don't know, make something less, like basically to make you less of a man. But I mean, it comes from the Latin like ex masculine, like ex masculus, I think. And so emasculate is the perfect word. Like it is.
And Paul is using it almost derogatorily.
Yes.
Okay. So that's his intent with this. There are a truckload of other words that could have been used here. Okay. The most popular one in the Greek language is ekbalo. And depending on context, ekbalo, ek means out and balo means throw. Okay. So quite literally means to throw out, but in context could be a lot, quite often. Get rid of, throw out, in some context cut off, okay? That would, if we were saying that if Paul was less severe, he might have used that and we could have had some translation freedom in that. But anytime the prefix ek is used in front of another verb and sometimes other nouns, it means get rid of, throw out, depending on what it's connected to. Okay. What other word it's connected to.
Similar, ek is similar to ex in our language.
Correct. Yeah. Like you just said, ex masculine or whatever that was.
Yeah. Ex boyfriend, to cut out the boyfriend.
Exactly. Okay. Very severe, man. Very severe with this. All right. We get to 13 then. All right. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Just draw back to verse 1. Here's another inclusio. You're called to freedom. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love, serve one another. I know we've been chatting at this for a little bit, but let me give a little bit of a review of Paul's strategy here. All right. Just to catch everybody up. Paul starts this entire letter by defending his apostolic authority. This is in chapter 1, verse 1, all the way through chapter 2, verse 21. He argues against the Judaizers that we've been talking about in chapter 3, verse 1 through 4:11. He urges his readers to live in freedom in chapter 4, verse 12. He warns of the consequences of following this false teaching in what we just read at the beginning of this chapter, chapter 5, verses 2 through 4. He expresses his confidence in his understanding of the truth and thinking that the truth will convict in chapter 5, verse 10. And then starting here in this verse, throughout a lot of the rest of the letter, he warns of what's called libertinism. Okay? Yeah. So we come back to that again. In other words, I'm free to do whatever I want, which is possible, but it's dangerous if you don't understand what's going on. And he says here, for you were called to freedom, brothers, only don't use that freedom in a self-serving way.
Yeah.
Use it through love, serve one another. So preaching point, faith is the root, serve is a fruit, right?
Yeah.
So again, all the way back to verse 1, you were free from something. Christ gave you freedom from something, but it's to serve something else. And you have anything else to add to that verse?
No, I think that's well put. No.
Okay.
I could have added to libertinism, but I'm not going to. We don't need to talk about it.
Well, Paul will in 14 and 15. Okay. Yeah. So for the whole law is fulfilled in one word. This is my favorite. One word. That here comes a bunch of words.
Yeah.
You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And we ought not be surprised by this. Okay. Paul didn't invent this or create this. He's quoting it. The implied rhetorical question here then is, do you want to perform the actual law? Here it is, one word, not circumcision, but love one another. If you need references to this, what Paul is citing here, Leviticus 19:18, Matthew 22:34-40, Romans 13:8-10, 1 John 3:11. Those are just a couple of places that this teaching is. This is the teaching of the word. There is no love of God without love of others.
Yeah. And I read an argument that was, why isn't it was answering the question, why isn't love the Lord your God also included? And it was this great little thing of like, it's assumed, like this is just the addition, like if you're following the law, the assumption is you already love God if you're following the law. So the whole law is fulfilled in the next step, which is love your neighbor as yourself. Correct. Which I just thought was fascinating.
Right. The Galatians are not struggling with loving God.
Yeah, exactly.
They're struggling with how to love God. And Paul is saying, okay, how you do it is love of neighbor.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen if you say, look at me, I'm obeying the law. Right. And because the result of that will be verse 15. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another.
One of my favorite verses. What a great turn of phrase. If you're going to bite and devour one another, you're going to be consumed by one another.
Yes.
So good.
Okay. So here's the cliffhanger. Paul, okay, I'm on board. You were exactly right. How do we avoid that? ...
Yeah. Yep.
What a fantastic passage. It preaches so well. And I think you and I could probably spend another hour or two really discussing some of the stuff that it brings up.
Yeah. We could easily have a 15-week series on 15 verses.
I think that you and I should start writing our book.
Cool. Sounds good.
Good deal.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us for Crosstalk. Sorry we're 4 weeks behind, but hey, welcome back and we're glad you're here. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or bold, salacious attempts to tell us where we're wrong, you can email me, samuelo@southrockchristian.com. He's Nick P. at southrockchristian.com. Next week, we'll be talking about
Galatians 5:16-26.
Yes, we will be.
Very famous passage, by the way.
Yes. So if you have anything, let us know. But until then, we'll see you.
See you later.